The elevator doors slid open with a soft jam. Ryan, clutching a stack of papers in one hand and balancing a coffee cup in other, hurried inside. She glanced at her watch. Nothing she had just enough time to make it to her morning meeting. As the doors began to close, a hand shot through the gap, triggering the sensors. Wan looked up, slightly startled, and saw Jungkook stepping inside the elevator. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, his hair perfectly styled. He was her neighbor. Jungkook, good morning, he said with a warm smile. Sometimes, like this, they had their encounters, leaving for work or coming back home at the same time, sometimes on weekends and on vacations. Fine. Morning, Jungkook. Late for work? Jungkook, just a bit. Seems like the coincidence of us meeting had to happen, dragging both of us to be late for work. The way he said it, as if the fate wanted them to meet. Wine shook her head, shuddering at the unknown feeling. Wine, maybe. Anyhow, busy day ahead? Jungkook nodded, leaning against the elevator wall. Jungkook, that's how it is. Every day, every year. Was it? She just ignored the feeling once again and reflected a sweet smile, which gave her a feeling that Jungkook could never took his eyes off her again. Was she overthinking? What if he was zoned out? Jungkook, let me know if you need any help for anything. We are neighbors. I can do that much. Ryan, thank you. Have a good day. She waved and stepped out of the elevator and left the building to her work. It had been like this always. Little encounters, little talks, and a step ahead to getting closer than they were the last time. It had been a long day at work, and Vine was exhausted by the time she finally arrived home. She unlocked the door to her apartment, kicked off her shoes, and set down her bag. The comforting quiet of her home was a welcome relief after the chaos of the day. She walked into the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. As she stood at her sink, her mind wandered back to Jungkook. The way he talks or behaves, it's as if she's enchanted by his every move. Lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice the shadow moving past her window. The sudden sound of her front door being kicked open jolted her out of her trance. Before she could react, a man she didn't recognize barged into her apartment. He was tall, with a menacing look in her eyes, and he reeked of alcohol. Vine widened her eyes and instantly stepped back. How could someone get inside? She locked the door herself. Vine's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. Vine, who are you, and how did you get inside? She demanded, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. She grabbed a knife from the holder. The man sneered, taking a step closer. Doesn't matter who I am. You're alone, and that's all that matters. He chuckled as he noticed her taking the knife. The way you enter the password is quite easy for me. Any passer to notice by. Wine's mind raced. She never thought much about it. Being quite tired after a whole day at work, she never thought anyone would try to barge in like that. Wine, get out of my apartment before I call the cops. He laughed, a cruel sound that made her skin crawl. Feisty one, huh? I like that. Just as he lunged towards her, Wine threw the knife towards his shoulder. It missed. The man easily dodged that clumsy attack. However, Wine seized the moment and bolted for the door. She barely made it halfway across the living room when he caught her by the arm, yanking her back. You are not going anywhere. He snarled, his grip tightening painfully. Wine, let me go, she shouted, struggling against him. He was much powerful than her, and twice in size as well. He threw her down on the floor and hovered above her. Stop struggling. You are mine. Just then, Jungkook stepped out of the elevator at the end of the hallway. Headed to his apartment after a late meeting, he paused, hearing a commotion coming from Vine's apartment. Recognizing her voice, he sprinted down the hallway and banged on the door. Jungkook, Ryan, are you okay? What's happening? He shouted, his voice filled with urgency and worry. Ryan, Jungkook, help me! She screamed, her voice laced with terror. Jungkook's heart pounded as he tried the door. Finding it locked, he rammed his shoulder against it, trying to break it down. Hold on, Ryan, he yelled, his voice filled with determination. Inside, Ryan was struggling fiercely, but the man's grip was like iron. Your boyfriend can't save you now. The intruder sneered and pinned her hands above her head and bit onto her cheek. One shut her mouth tightly not to give in to that pain. Suddenly, with a loud crash, the door flew open as Jungkook charged it, his face a mask of fury. He took in the scene in the instant, the broken vase, the fear in Vine's eyes, and the man above her. His rage boiled over, and he launched himself at the attacker without a second thought. Vine noticed his arm was bleeding, and then her eyes fell towards the door to find the fire extinguisher, which he used to probably break the lock. Jungkook roared a curse and grabbed the man by the collar and slammed him against the wall. The intruder tried to fight back, but Jungkook was relentless. Fueled by anger and adrenaline, Vine instantly sat up, putting a hand on her cheek. Jungkook's fists met him one after another. Wine never knew this side of him existed. He was usually quite composed and easygoing kind of person. Jungkook, get out of here before I kill you. He threw him away filled in his own blood. The intruder, overwhelmed by Jungkook's ferocity, struggled to get away. With a final shove, Jungkook threw the man towards the door. If I ever see you near her again, you are dead. He growled, his voice low and dangerous. The man, now bleeding and visibly shaken, scrambled to his feet and ran out of the apartment. He thought he was saved, but he didn't know Jungkook had already informed the security about the incident when he couldn't break through the door, and as soon as the man ran out, he was captured and handed to the cops. As soon as he was gone, Wine's knees buckled. Jungkook was at her side in an instant. Catching her before she could fall, he wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly. Jungkook, it's okay. I got you now. Wine clung to him, her bold exterior crumbling right in his arms. She buried her face in his chest, her body trembling. Wine, I I thought he was going to. Her voice broke and the tears she had been holding began to fall. Jungkook, shh, it's okay. You're safe now. I told you. I've got you. Wine sobbed quietly against him, the terror of the experience washing over her in waves. Jungkook held her close. He whispered comforting words, letting her cry it out in his arms. After a while, her sobs subsided, and she pulled back slightly, looking up at him with red rimmed eyes. Wine, thank you, Jungkook. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come. He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb, his gaze gentle. Jungkook, I know how to save a woman, especially when she is mine. Wine's heart skipped a beat. Did she heard it right? Wine, Jungkook, what are you? Jungkook, I don't know if it's the right moment for it, but today's event has shocked me, like it has affected you. I've liked you for a long time now, Wine, and I want to be your man and protect you. Wine felt hypnotized by those words. Was the proposal supposed to feel like this when it comes from a person you dearly like? Her eyes shifted down to his chest as she kept holding his shirt, and his fingers kept brushing through her hair. She nodded once, and Jungkook closed his eyes, feeling the relief washed over him. He, yet, wasn't satisfied with how easily she was attacked, and had decided to take more safety measures with the security team of the building. How could such a person easily roam inside the building? He exhaled and held her tightly in his arms. As the two sat there on the floor, Jungkook felt mine had relaxed in his arms. He held her cheek and looked deep in his eyes. Jungkook, first we'll start with fixing the door and teaching how to use it better. She scratched her head out of embarrassment, and he simply shook his head. Something clicked in her head and she instantly looked at his arm. Why? Did you really break the door? You're hurt. Jungkook had to, and I am fine, don't worry. She stood up and brought him to the couch. She treated his arm herself. There was an injury around his wrist, which she took care of. Wine. Bring it to me tomorrow. I'll replace the bandage. Jungkook. Am I getting treated like this every time I'm injured? Wine. No. That's why you shouldn't get injured. She scrunched her nose with a glare, and he chuckled, throwing his hands up in the air. Jungkook. Will you go out with me on a date? Tomorrow? Wine. I will get back from work earlier. He took her hand and kissed her head. It was new, and she felt those butterflies churning in her stomach, going full on party mode. Having him as her neighbor for 4 years now, she knew much about his personality, and being in a relationship with her neighbor excited her quite a lot. Being able to easily sneak in each other's apartments and spend the time as much as together was something they looked forward to.